everybody. Welcome to another episode of Scholar Chit Chat. And I'm your host, OJ. Today we have another guest, a special guest, Emma Claire, who's here with us today, which is going to share her experience with getting funding to study for our undergraduate in Canada. So can you please join me in welcoming Emma to the show? Thank you so much, Emma.
Thank you so much, OJ. I'm so excited to be here and to share my experience with everyone. And I hope that at least one or two people are able to relate or it would give them some direction and the next steps. But yeah, I'm so happy you invited me on the platform today.
All right, thank you for being here. We are super excited to have you here, and I know that we'll learn a lot from you. So I think pretty much the first thing I would like us to start with is just getting to know you actually before we actually talk about the topic at hand. But can you please introduce yourself, whatever details you feel comfortable sharing, but just to give the audience an insight into who you are and what you do, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So, yes, OJ mentioned my name's Emma Claire. Cameroonian from birth, and I had the chance of moving for my undergrad here in Canada in the province of British Columbia, precisely at the University of British Columbia in 2016 to begin my undergrad in engineering. After my first year, usually that's when the program requires students to specialize, and I picked up chemical and biological engineering, which I ended up getting my degree in 2020. Following that, I ended up working as a quality engineer and implementation specialist in the manufacturing world. Yeah, I'm using my degree in some way, but yeah, I've been able to kind of find my footing ever since graduating and getting my undergrad here in Canada.
Oh, wow, that's super cool. I mean, yeah, that's super cool actually that you've been able to you moved successfully, completed your studies, and also have been able to start I guess on a career path. So that's really lovely to hear, and I think that makes me all the more excited to actually hear what you have to say today. So you mentioned moving from your country, Cameroon, to Canada for your undergraduate student. I think that's basically why we're here. Can you share some of the backstory, what led you to that decision? It's very far from home. You went far from home, quite literally, for that.
Very, very, very far. So I don't know if there'll be anyone on the listening that will relate, but most people who are going to start their undergrad in 2016, I'll talk with most Cameroonians I've spoken to and my classmates that we share the same experience. We're initially all looking in the US or the UK, which most of us usually do when we're looking for universities. Canada wasn't really on my radar to begin with, but with just the political climate that was happening in the US in 2016, and just hint for everyone, that's when Trump won his first election mandate. I think my parents were a little bit concerned about me being a Black African moving to the US, and so we started looking for different alternatives, and that's when I was just oh yeah, Canada is just across the border. So I started looking into the different universities in Canada and just seeing which ones offered funding, which ones I was eligible to apply to. So that's kind of how my trajectory changed from the US, which was the primary country I was looking into, and how I ended up selecting Canada.
That's very interesting. I mean, people don't normally think about how I guess political climate would have wider impact on people's choices and decisions. But just a clear example, I think one other thing that stood out to me actually from your response is that it seems that people in Cameroon it's pretty normal to look outside the country for undergraduates. It's a norm rather than a special circumstance.
Yeah, and it's actually getting more and more popular ever since I left. So in Cameroon, for just context for other people, our secondary and high school in total forms 7 years, and we follow the curriculum. So we do our O levels and our A levels. So after the A levels, students usually, especially from the English background, I know we also have the French speakers in Cameroon as well. From the English background, from there you would then look into the different universities or trade schools you would want to to be part of. So we have like huge like engineering schools and medical schools, and it's very limited and very competitive to get into those universities. So when you look at how many people graduate from all high schools in Cameroon, and you look at how many seats they're offering to these like prestigious universities, you would have some students like me who would not be lucky enough to get one of those seats. So that's when people started looking and branching out to other universities abroad to see if they can get like a world-class education, basically, to kind of further their steps in like their career and their education. Yeah.
It's really, really cool. And yeah, that's really, really neat. And I think it's probably something I know Nigerians like to leave the country a little bit. I think that's more of a special circumstance than actually a norm for people to actually like cast their gaze to other countries. And I think it's pretty much why we're having this episode to kind of show people that this is an option. Because you meet people who like spend years trying to get into universities in Nigeria, like they spend a long time, and that is not because they even failed their exams. Like they actually would pass all the qualifying exams. But again, as you said, competition, right? There's a lot of competition, and then they're not able to get any place anywhere. So yeah, so this is, again, I'm so glad that you shared this aspect, because open people's eyes to see like what's possible.
So for the stories shared, like both, I think, as we mentioned, I was like, yeah, Cameroon, Nigeria, I think it's two different countries, but there's a shared sentiment and experience there.
Yeah. So, and I mean, of course, our listeners are not just Nigerians, actually, to be honest. I know we've had, I think, a lot more Nigerians, obviously, because I'm Nigerian, I know a lot more Nigerians, but I think we're open to like having this kind of insight from anybody, really. And I guess we kind of share like similarities in background, so a lot of things are also quite applicable across a lot of African countries, to be honest. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, so I think the question I have, and the question in a lot of people's mind is, okay, so how are you able to do it? What happened? How
Yes.
What scholarship did you get? How were you able to do it?
Yeah, for sure. And as I mentioned earlier, I was initially looking into like the US. And when I was doing my prep classes for the national exams back in Cameroon, I kind of like stumbled across like an alumni from my high school, and we're just like catching up. And I asked him where he was, and he was telling me that he's doing his med school in the University of Kwame Nkrumah under the Mastercard Foundation Scholarship. And I was like, this was the first time I was hearing about that scholarship, and I was like, oh, interesting. And the more he spoke about that scholarship, I was just like, okay, I really need to go Google this out and see, like, it felt too good to be true.
Yeah.
And so I Googled the Mastercard Foundation Scholarship Program. I noticed that they had a lot of like affiliation or like partners with like different schools in the Americas, Africa, and like a few, I think they have a few in other, like I think they have one in France. But yeah, so they have like partners with like different universities. And so that was just like, okay, this seems like a great opportunity. And as I was looking into like the universities in the US, the ones that had Mastercard were kind of like my top choice. And as I mentioned, how I had to do like that pivot to like start looking into the universities in Canada, I was also very excited to see that UBC was actually one of like the partners with Mastercard Foundation. And so I just started the whole process of like applying and like connecting with different people who had applied to like the scholarship prior to me, and just getting some like mentorship and like guide on how to proceed with the next steps.
Yeah, I think one of the things you share are quite, I think, reoccurring themes when we talk about scholarships generally. I think some of the things you mentioned are things that keep coming up. One, the fact that you found out something that was quite new and interesting to you, and you went home to do like your own research. And then two, the fact that you also connected with mentors that helped, that kind of, I guess, shed some more insight into the whole process and maybe helped you review your application and whatnot. But so yeah, I think we'll get back to this. But again, for people who are just hearing about the Mastercard Foundation Scholarship, what do you have to say about it? What does the scholarship cover?
So the Mastercard Scholarship, so I'll speak specifically to my experience with UBC, because the way they partner with different universities would be different, and so different scholars have different experiences. But specifically with UBC, when I was applying with the foundation, the scholarship was going to cover my tuition. So it was like a full ride scholarship, my tuition for all my 4 years in university. It covered my accommodation, and it also even provided like stipend every month. It was almost like just having like that really cool uncle or auntie that was just like, I will support your education for you and like your dreams. So that's kind of what the scholarship covered for me. In like my first year, they help you again, pairing you up with mentors to be able to get all the equipment, materials, and even like textbooks you would need for your school. And so they kind of covered all of that, but they also encouraged us to kind of like integrate in with like the school and the different students so that we're also able to like find jobs and like find our footings with the Canadian or like the British Columbian system.
You described it wonderfully. I think I like the analogy of how it's like the big uncle or the big auntie that just takes care of you. And from what you've said, it does seem that way, right? Because they care of basically everything. I don't think there's any aspect that's left. Like the finances is covered. And you also talk about how they sort of also are involved in like your socialization, I guess, and your well-being beyond just providing financial aid. And I think that's something that for a lot of scholarships we've talked about, I don't think a lot of people mention that. I mean, a full ride scholarship is amazing. Getting money to cover everything is amazing, but I think one of the interesting things you mentioned about this one is how you sort of go beyond. So that's really cool to hear.
Yeah, one of the goals with the scholarship was not only to provide a world-class education for like mostly sub-Saharan African students to like universities, but was also to develop like transformative leaders. So they were trying to create balanced people. Like you are good with your grades, but you also know how to be like that people person. You're able to like listen and to also like lead people. So they kind of like gave us like a well-rounded scholarship experience. And that's one of the reasons why I really love the scholarship program.
Oh, that was really nice to hear. So thank you so much for sharing that. I hope I believe all the audience is kind of like picking up and learning all this, because I feel like one of the worries that people have is that to study for an undergraduate degree, you are leaving your home country as a teenager. So it can be quite daunting, I imagine, to be far away from home and all the culture shocks and even just different things. But at least I believe that this support would have helped you settle in somehow.
100%, yes, it did.
So for people who have worries, I think the Mastercard Scholarship covers this aspect of like socialization and stuff. Okay, so let's talk. Well, now we've talked about the Mastercard Scholarship, and talk about the Mastercard Scholarship, and I believe that people will be quite interested in like applying. So I think first of all, I would like to know like what kind of profile, I don't know, like what's the profile of a typical Mastercard scholar, I guess, like what kinds of results do you need to have? Are there things that would boost your chances of getting the scholarship?
Yeah, so the first thing would just be like also just being like a well-rounded student. So again, like with every other scholarship, like the grades are usually what's very important. The next thing that Mastercard kind of looked at was just like the financial need. They wanted to be able to assess the financial condition of like your family, and just proving that you are not able to like support yourself, like even in your home country, like you have this amazing talent, but you don't have the resources to even go to university in your own home country. And that's why they're really there to kind of like support these brilliant talents to kind of like again access education and kind of like foster or like further their way with like the different dreams they want and like giving back to the community. So Mastercard looked at grades, they looked at like they assessed your finances. They also looked for people who are like passionate and committed to their communities and had like a tie to their communities, because it's one thing to be able to have all these grades, but it's the whole giving back aspect that Mastercard also on, because they are like, we want to be able to like support one person that would go back and support their entire community, and that's how a society grows. So that's kind of like the three branches Mastercard, at least in UBC, kind of like looked at when they were like going through profiles for like the candidates that applied for the funds.
Okay, that's very interesting that you can kind of succinctly identify the categories that or the things to look for in a candidate. So you've mentioned the grades, which is obviously super important at every point. You have to be a good student, otherwise nobody wants to invest a lot of money in your education. And then financial need, I think that's one where a lot of scholarships don't actually focus on this. But yeah, so this is good that you have to demonstrate the fact that you need the money, and then you also mention ties to the home country. And I think this is one I'm going to ask more questions on, because as a teenager, how do you prove that you have ties to your country apart from maybe you have parents there? I don't know if Yeah, the question makes any sense.
No, it does. It actually does. And I'll share my experience on like what I wrote during my application. So when growing up, again, I'm a first daughter to a typical African household. And so there was like always a lot of expectations on me when I was growing up. And it was and I don't know if anyone else would share the sentiment, but it was always like girl children, they don't want to spend a lot of money on your education. Like usually if you get like your O levels or your A levels, they're like, yes, you've done enough, like go get married. But I really grew up in like a family where my dad really supported his female kids. And so just looking at my experience and how my dad supported my dreams, and there was no like discrimination between myself and my brothers and other people experience, I decided to basically kind of create a club when I was, I don't remember how old I was, but I was like quite young. And I decided to create like a club that was all about just encouraging young girls in my community to like further their educations in the sciences. Like again, it was just always like this taboo, like girls can be engineers. And I was just like, says who? So I was kind of like that person who just always like wanted to rock the status quo in like my community. So I always gather with like a few girls and we'll do our math assignments together. My mom is a biology teacher, so she has like a lot of science background. And so would always just be like trying to teach each other in like in the community. And as I kept going on into like high school as well, it kept going bigger. And I was able now to start to support even like people who just started like their secondary school. And I think that was one of the essays I had written to like the Mastercard Foundation, and how my passion is truly just wanting to see a world where women can do whatever they want to do. And that kind of tied into like, yeah, kind of presented how I have ties to my community and how I hope to give back to my community with the education I'm receiving at UBC.
Wow. I can really I can really see it. Like you're really passionate for a young girl, and yeah, I can see why you got the scholarship now. Because I mean that's a lot. I don't think I was thinking about. I mean, I don't think, to be honest, no, I don't think I was thinking about those things as a teenager. So it's really inspiring to hear you talk about like your commitment to empowering like female child even when you were one yourself. So that's like really, really inspiring to hear. So I mean, I think it also provided an insight into like how people can navigate that aspect and show their ties to their community.
Yeah, and everyone did it slightly differently. Like mine was all about just like female education. There were other people who kind of like helped out, just like supporting like their parents' businesses. And it was just like that initiative where it's like you care or you want to see the world succeed more than just you. So you're not just limiting success to yourself. And I think that was truly the heart of what the recruiters were looking for when each person applied for the scholarship.
Oh, that's profound. That's great. That's really great to know. Yeah. I mean, it's quite inspiring to hear that people were doing awesome things as teenagers, to be honest. I'm very, very inspired. I think I would also like to talk about like the results, because grades are obviously very important. Like for what's I know there's different kind of examinations. We were talking about it just before we started recording, how in Cameroon you don't write WAEC, right? Because you're not a West African country. In terms of like grades, are there specific requirements, or are there also specific like special standardized examinations for UBC maybe specifically? I don't know if you can speak to other universities as well.
Yeah, and I'll share my experience. And because I had applied to different schools, I kind of saw the requirements that each school had. So when I was applying to the US, yes, like the SATs and the ACTs, like the standardized exams were like a must. So I remember like writing the SATs, the SAT subjects, especially if you wanted to specialize in a specific area. I did that. But when I was actually applying to Canada, so UBC, they didn't need all those SAT that I had like studied so much for. They actually looked at my advanced levels as my transcript and all my, because again we have the O levels and the A levels, and so they looked at that for my grades. And then the standardized exam I actually had to take was more like the TOEFL for English proficiency. And I know a lot of people didn't have to do the TOEFL. In my experience, the only reason I had to take the TOEFL was because I had gone to a bilingual school in Cameroon. And so trying to explain to like admission office that, yes, I went to a bilingual school, so my education was both in English and in French, but my core subjects were all in English. They were like, but we want to just make sure that your English level is like good enough to like come over here for university. And so that was one of the reasons why I had to take the TOEFL to just show that I had English proficiency when I was applying to UBC. But other than that, they just looked at my advanced level transcripts for my grades.
Okay, that's really great to know. So yeah, I think what WAEC is kind of similar to the O level. That's what people of West Africa. I think it's similar to the O level, but I think the A levels is something entirely different that people have to sit for. So I'm not sure that the WAEC would be sufficient. I don't know if you have any information about this, to be honest.
Not fully. I know I have a friend, but she had taken the WAEC, and I think that was enough for her because she also came to UBC. But I know she had like different exams to do, but I wouldn't know specifically what exams she did to supplement her WAEC scores.
Okay. Yeah, because I feel like the WAEC I believe it's similar to the O levels, but the A levels is still advanced. So I feel like she probably had to maybe do something very similar to the A levels or the A levels itself. Yeah, so yeah, but like at least it's good to know the kind of exams or the certifications tests someone has to pass for that. And obviously you would want to make yourself a competitive student and try to get as high scores as possible, obviously. So I don't think we have to go into much details about like scores and stuff like that. And I think, I was going to ask, are there other documents or requirements? Did you need to have like letters of recommendation? Like what was the application process itself like?
Yeah, so the application was such a long time ago, but the application was kind of like in two parts. It's like I was applying to UBC and applying to Mastercard, like two separate applications. So the application to UBC was just how any other person applying to the University of British Columbia would be. So you had like your personal statements that you had to write, and there were different prompts basically. And so you would pick a prompt and just write, and you're trying to kind of put in your character, your personality throughout in words, so that the person who is reading it kind of like sees who you are in addition to the grades that the university already has. And then for Mastercard, the application was slightly similar, but again, the prompts were more catered to, again, what was your role in the community? Who are the people who inspired you? How do you want to inspire other people in your life and stuff like that? So the prompts are slightly different, but you always have to write like a personal statement. Or I had to write personal statements, a lot of them for both applications.
So there's a lot of writing involved. So it's not just a test, you have to be able to write and sell yourself. Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. You think that this is what's the name? This because something that comes up a lot in grad school applications, right? And I think in Africa generally, we don't normally talk about writing. I don't know if Cameroon, I shouldn't say in Africa, maybe I should say in West Africa. It was very interesting to hear that just to get into like university of undergraduate degrees, you have to write essays, which I don't know about Cameroon, but in Nigeria, I guess the most of West Africa is not the case. You just write exams, series of exams actually, different levels, because they're just trying to filter you out at multiple levels. And then if you make it to the end, you get in, essentially. And nobody writes any essay. And the secondary school system also doesn't prepare you for these kinds of essay. Of course, you learn how to write generally, but
like difficult thinking that it comes, or like just like the analysis that it comes to like writing good essays. I would agree with you. I think that was something that was just like lacking from like my education, because after I graduated, I had to take like separate classes on how to write proper essays, and just again like we learned like the basics, but there's just something about just like academic writing, exactly, that's the word I'm looking for, that we are not really taught. And so I had to take like classes on academic writing. The people I connected with, so I was on LinkedIn, I was just like looking at people's profiles that I connected with that had like Mastercard scholars on it, or that they were in like the university I was interested in. I kind of like connected with them, and I sent a few of them like my statements, and I had them like review it for me, and I got a lot of feedback. Like the growth was steep, but it was helpful. And I was like, oh my God, it's little things I didn't know about. But yeah, I learned a lot on like the people and like the network I had created to kind of help me build strong personal statements and essays.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that backstory. Because again, I feel like people don't get enough insight. Like if you just said, "Oh, I wrote a personal statement," because you have to write one, people just think, "Oh, yeah, she knows how to write a personal statement. Maybe she was privileged and she got to learn it in school." But you've given us the fact, talked about the fact that you had to enroll for special classes, you had to do a lot of back and forth, and there was a learning curve involved. So it means that there was a lot of hard work. How long did you actually prepare for this? Did you get in on your first try? And if you did, which congratulations, that was super amazing. How long did it actually take you from when you heard about the Mastercard scholarship to through all these preparatory processes to getting into one?
So I got in like my first try. Was honestly thanks to God. Graduation in Cameroon usually happens in like June. So for exam classes, like after the A levels, it's like end of June. And I started doing my prep classes again for those national exams that I had mentioned. And I heard about the Mastercard around like that July, August period. So I basically had that September to December when it was like deadlines for applications to kind of cram everything in. So within that time period, remember again, this is when I'm still applying to like US schools, and I had to pivot, and I was like, no, it's Canadian schools I'm applying to at this point. I'm writing SATs, I'm writing the TOEFL, so learning how to do academic writing. So it was like a very short timeline and like a lot to like learn in that period. But yeah, so that was kind of like the time frame I had. So you would say late August to like December, mid-December, because that's, I think, December 14, weirdly enough, I can remember that date. That's when my TOEFL scores came out, and I was like submitted it immediately to like the UBC portal before it closed.
So that was, I can imagine that was a very, very intense period of a lot of just applying, writing, communicating with people. So wow, yeah, okay. And as a teenager, like you kudos actually. I think you did an awesome job.
Yeah, no, like when you mentioned it, I forget that I did that as a teenager. It's crazy to think about that.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. It's very impressive. This is very impressive. And I also wanted to ask, because you mentioned having to take lessons, obviously, write tests. I'm sure there's some cost involved. But I think another thing people will be very interested in is there's a cost involved in applying for the scholarship itself. So applying to the university, applying to Mastercard, do you have to pay application fees?
Oh, yes, you do. So yeah, like I know you highlighted that earlier, but yeah, all these classes were all like to prepare for all of this. There was a cost involved. I was so grateful that my dad was able to support me, and I was like, this is an investment. And that's why I also felt like there was so much pressure to like get into these schools. But then there's also the application fee to get into for like the university applications and all of that. So with how it worked with UBC is you apply to the school, like I mentioned, independently for Mastercard. And so you kind of have to pay all the application fees that they require. And I think it's probably changed over the years. But then once the university approves or you've been selected by the university, and Mastercard already then finds that you are a perfect candidate for like the scholarship, they kind of like reimburse those application fees. So it was, I don't know if that makes sense. So so they allowed the school to basically focus on those academics. So if UBC was like, yes, you're a competitive student, we want you to come to our university, Mastercard then looks at the other part of your application and like, yes, this is someone we want. And so now they kind of like retroactively then give you back the application fee that you paid to get into UBC.
That's really neat. So I mean, it means you get, wow, that's super cool actually. That's super cool. I'm kind of even lost for words. I'm like, I've not really heard something like that before. So it means if you do get in, you kind of have been carried from the very beginning to the very, very end. Super cool.
Yeah, that scholarship was amazing. And I feel like anyone who got it, like myself, are truly grateful for it, because from the moment you get accepted, like I said, they just cover everything. Even like my flight from Cameroon to like Canada the first time was covered by the foundation. And I was just like, oh my God, this is great.
Yeah, like, no, it's super amazing. Super cool, actually. Super cool. I think that will be coming to to a close. I still have a couple of questions, but I'm just like we're winding down gradually. But before
Mhm.
I give the opportunity to talk about like last words and stuff like that, I think it'd be interesting to hear to hear a bit about your experience. It's not about application, but I think when people are considering
Mm.
applying as well, it's good for them to know like what the experience was like. So, a teenager who's moved from home to a new environment, new culture, and everything. What did you enjoy the most? What did you find the most difficult? Kind of thing.
Yeah, so culture shock is a thing. Like you read about it and you're like, yeah, I don't think it'll be that bad. But culture shock is really a thing. And I feel like if you kind of like are prepared for it, it kind of softens the blow a little bit, but it's still very much present. I was very lucky again with like the foundation that there were other students that looked like me that got this opportunity. So we kind of like created a community and we are all still really good friends to this date. A few of us are like still neighbors. Like it's so funny.
Mm.
But yeah, it's just like finding your people who understand the work that you're working on and are sharing that path with you. Like I know moving from like a country again as like a young girl where we just had like the raining and the dry season to come into experiencing like all the four seasons.
Yeah.
The sun. Oh my God, I think this was the biggest cultural shock for me. OJ was like during the winter, it's like you wake up, it's dark. By the time you're done classes, it's dark because the sun just
Mm.
sets at like 4 p.m. I'm just like, what is this? And I'm someone who really loves the sun. And so you kind of see how that affects your health, it affects your mood. But then being part of a community where everyone is really transparent and are able to talk about it was like, oh, I'm not the only one going through this. Kind of helped validate so many of the feelings I was having. But I would also say, in as much as finding your community is so important, I would also tell people try and integrate. Like people from different countries also come here and they all might look different from you. But again, there is that shared experience that we all are like really young. We came here by ourselves to kind of like get a good education. So try and integrate with the system or like the society that you are in and learn a lot from the people around you as well, because it just kind of like shifts that experience for you. It kind of like embellishes like the way you kind of like live every day when you move away when you're so young. So I would say the community definitely helped with my experience. It wasn't roses and flowers every day, but the fact that I was able to like stay in touch with my parents, call them. We thank God for technology because you can FaceTime them, and then just tapping into like the different, because most universities would offer like counseling services, which is not a big thing where we are coming from, but I would say lean into all of those because they really provide like a positive impact in like your experience once you move away from home at such a young age or whatever age you are, because again, it is a culture shock that happens once you leave home.
Honestly, yeah. When you're speaking, I think, yeah, you're right. Culture shock is a thing because when you're talking, it kind of just reminded me of the early days as well when I moved from my
Mm.
scholarship to the UK. So it's pretty much the same thing, going from the wet to dry to all the four seasons and not seeing the sun,
Mhm.
which was like, how can they not the sun? It's a fixture in life, right? But well, you just figure out that well, it's not. That's not what usually happens. So, but yeah, thank you so much for
Yeah.
doing that. And I think at least to give people the confidence, just hearing that you've been there, you've excelled, you said you've been there since 2016. So it's almost getting to 10 years
Getting to
now.
10 years.
Yeah, it's getting 10 years. So, I mean, I think it obviously highlights the fact that with the Mastercard scholarship, you're not mandated to return home.
Yeah, so they switched that mandate when I think I was in like my second year in university. So yeah, but initially when I signed the contract, I was like, yeah, after 4 years, I'm coming back to Cameroon to help improve
Yeah,
to help with my community. But yeah, that mandate is no longer there, but it's still again just like how are you giving back to what you
yeah.
call community? It could be back home, it could be the community you found over here, but they still very much encourage that give back aspect.
Yeah, I like how you kind of shared like even if you've not returned, you still feel like a sense of responsibility towards your community, both actually the ones physically present in Africa and the ones you've kind of cultivated around you now in Canada. So I think that's one thing that people forget actually, that giving back, you don't necessarily have to be physically present. I think for me, like even just having this this kind of podcast and you joining here, you already giving back. If you've not had those experiences, you wouldn't be able to share. And so in multiple ways, there are like different avenues to give back, and I think it's quite difficult for a lot of people to hands off from home because it's still home. You still think about home like home is home. I don't know. I don't.
Always
Does that
home.
change in 10 years? Like I've not been here for 10 years. I've been here for 3, 4. Does that change in
Mhm.
10?
Home being home.
Yeah, yeah. How you feel for home?
Yeah, like right now, like home, Cameroon is always going to be home for me. But there is now this part where it's like 10 years, almost 10 years of my life is here. So I have like friends that have become family. So there is a part of home here as well. So it becomes very interesting having like a part of you that longs and wants to go back to like the soil that you grew up in. But it's also like so many ties that you've made over that are not necessarily by blood or like by nationality, but you're still bonded to these people. So it's again just what you call community becomes home for you wherever you are.
Yeah. When you're speaking, reminded me of this popular saying we normally say, I would say blood is thicker than water. But I
Mm-hmm.
figured out, I found out that was not the full saying, and it was the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, which means the people
Yeah,
you choose you have stronger ties with them than the people that you kind of were given when you came into this life.
good.
Okay, so I think we're kind of at the end. So I just want to know, I'm giving you the opportunity to kind of share your kind of last words with people who are considering applying. You can talk about like mistakes you've seen people make. I don't know if you've seen a lot of that and how people can avoid those. And just generally kind of your general advice for people. And I think I also would like you to speak to maybe, for instance, parents who are hesitant to let their
Yeah.
kids go, kids that may be showing aptitude for this kind of things, this kind of
Mhm.
I have interest in actually leaving home, and then they have like reluctant parents led. So I think maybe you should answer the first part, which is talking to the applicants themselves, and then you can also throw
Yeah.
in some words of counsel for parents or guardians that will be hesitant.
For sure. Yeah. So for anyone who is thinking about applying or is in the process of applying right now, I would say the sky is your limit. Like, don't let people around you or like what community says about you limit or stunt what you want to dream. Like, if you are passionate about something, like I would say, honestly, go for it. Do your research. Do not be scared of like reaching out to like strangers. Again, my story is the way it is because I would bump into people, hear something, connect to other people. Like there's so much knowledge within human beings. So as you're applying and you just want to connect with people, send out those emails and be as polite as possible and just be like, hey, want to take a few minutes of your time if you could like help me do XYZ, for example. So not let limitations that people are trying to place on you kind of like limit your dreams or stunt your dreams. Like I would say, do your research, reach out, network. It's very, very important. And trust yourself and trust your abilities. When you're writing those personal statements, even if it doesn't feel as polished as you think as you wanted it, pour yourself into those words because the people who read them are actually trying to look for who you are behind the grades. So it could be a mundane story that you don't think people want to hear about it. But if it's something that you are really passionate about and you write it down, trust me, the passion would come across. Like that's usually how my first drafts would be. I wouldn't care about the sentence structure. I would just write out what I was passionate about. And then later on, with the help of different people, they kind of like help me make like powerful impacts with like the sentences or the words I was choosing. So I would definitely say those as like my advice for anyone who is applying. And as for parents, I know it's always a scary situation to let your kids go away. I remember my mom at the airport was like crying and she's like, I can't believe you're leaving us. But I
Yeah.
kind of like reassured my parents and I told them that you brought me up the best you could. Like all that I am right now is because of like the different skills and characters you've impacted in me. So trust that you've done a good job for me to continue to like live as an adult. And I think kind of like switching that for my parents made a lot more sense. And they were like, yeah, you know what? That is true. Like our parents will always care and like be worried about us. But let that not again limit your kids' progression in their career and education. Like as parents, we can pray, hope for their best, but we also need to allow them live their lives, make their own mistakes. Because trust me, we learn quicker when we make the mistakes ourselves rather than someone telling us that. So I'll tell parents, just trust how you brought up your kids. always checking on them, very important, especially for parents who have kids that are already abroad, always checking on them because life can get very busy and very tough over here. But like just hearing words from people we love and cherish from back home always grounds us. So yeah, check out on them, let them make their own mistakes, and always be there to like, we will catch you if you do fall. Like just that reassurance would help them continue to do those strides as they want to, knowing that their parents would always have their backs. That would be my advice for the parents.
Wow, that's like super profound. I like how I think there's a lot of wisdom there. I don't even know. I don't think I can summarize it. I think I probably have to listen to it again to be able to summarize everything. But like, I think it was very insightful how you talked about actually like having the parents see things from another perspective, like how they've done a good job and should be able to like trust you to carry on being like a good child that they've raised you to be. I think that's really going to be a massive game changer and help people to think about it in a completely different way. So thank you so much, Emma, for sharing your time with us, sharing your insights and sharing your experiences with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was lovely being able to do that with you and for the people listening.
Yeah, I believe that our listeners have found the episode enlightening and helpful, and I believe like you've kind of highlighted new opportunities. I believe people have learned about new opportunities like the Mastercard one, and you've mentioned that they have partnerships not just with Canada. So Canada is obviously a very good country, but they have partnerships with America. I think you mentioned France possibly, and I'm sure like again we always encourage people to check the website for more up-to-date information. There may be much more that Emma obviously cannot cover, and maybe there are some things she doesn't even know anymore because it's been a while. So the website will give you the most up-to-date information, but as Emma said in her last words, don't limit yourself. The sky definitely is like the starting point. So there are a lot of opportunities. If you are interested in anything, chase after it. Be like Emma, ask people questions. Don't shy away from things that you feel passionate about. And again, scholarship like Emma is a good case example because she has been there for almost 10 years now and she just talked about what she does. Yeah, definitely her life is all the better for this experience. So give yourself the chance to experience the wonders of life. As I was going to say, for everybody listening, please give yourself the chance to experience these wonderful things that are there, and at Scholar Chit Chat we keep bringing you awesome guests to talk about their experiences and to share interesting opportunities with you. But until next time, keep striving and stay inspired. Bye.